And at this point in time, I wanted to introduce a certain idea that's kind of always been around me as I've worked in Europe over the last 20 years, is why Americans always insist on being number one. And in the end, the longer I've lived in Europe, the less I've been able to answer this question. And I've actually started mirroring this question back to my students, to you students. Why is it important to be number one? And the answers I get are really kind of silly, because it is. Why is it important to be number one? Because that's what we do. Why do we do that? Because we are that way. I haven't really gotten from anybody a really successful answer as to why we need to be number one. Probably the more interesting one is a theology major one time said, well, if we're number one, that means that we're more able to spread the gospel. And I agree, of course, with that, but I think it's more if we're powerful, in other words, if we're able to influence, then we're more able to spread the gospel. I agree with that, and I think it's very important. However, that's not number one, that's just powerful. I live and work in Germany. Germany is a very powerful country, and they're not really concerned whether they rank as the number one this or the number one that. There are certain points where they're proud of that here, but this pervasive, we have to be on top, or else something's bad here. That is very, in my opinion, uniquely American. I haven't seen that among anyone else except the Swiss. The Swiss, I'll go ahead and tell you the story here. I was talking to a Swiss guy one time, and he said, "You Americans think you're number one, but we Swiss are number one, and we're the best." And I said, "Well, is there any part of Switzerland which is better than any other parts?" He said, "Yes, my canton where I live, that's the best canton." And I asked him why, and he explained it for a couple minutes. And I said, "Well, is there any part of your canton which is better than the others?" He said, "Yes, well, my city is better than the other cities." And he explained it for 5 or 10 minutes. And I thought, well, surely this has got to stop. And I said, "Okay, let's see how far this goes." I was thinking, what about your canton, your city, any part of that? "Well, yes, my district is better." And he explained to me why this was the best district within his city. I thought, okay, surely he's going to stop here, but let me push this, and because I was having fun. "And what about your district?" "Yes, my subdivision is better." And he explained that, and I thought, okay, what about your subdivision? "Yes, my street is better." I thought, surely this is going to stop with the street, but no. I said, "What about the street?" "Well, my house is better than..." And he had very, very thought out reasons why his house was better than any other house on the street. I thought, surely this has to stop here. But no, I said, "Is there any part of your house which is better?" He said, "Well, yes, my room is better than my other room because my brother does this and my sister does that and my father and mother and blah, 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 blah. And my little space inside the house is the best." So that's basically an example of individualism. Let's talk for a second about political risk. Is the likelihood that political decisions, that the events or the conditions will affect a country's business environment in ways that will cost investors some or all of the value of their investments or force them to accept a lower than projected rate of return. Obviously, if a company invests in another country, in a business in another country, they don't want to lose that. They don't want the business being expropriated. As has happened in a couple of examples, not too many, fortunately, in China in recent years. So the legal system specifies the rules that regulate behavior, the process that enforces the rules in the country, and the processes which resolve the grievances. In more modern times, we've had constitutions in most countries that preserve an open and just, I say just in quotation marks, a system of criminal law that safeguards social order, a system of civil and commercial laws that promotes fairness and efficiency in business transactions. All of these type of things belong to the political environment that we regard as important. Basically, there are two types of law systems, legal systems. There's the common law system, which is basically what was started in England with the Magna Carta, obviously introduced to the United States and is the dominant system in the United States in every legal system except for Louisiana. And it is based on precedent, you see this all the time in examples of court cases where there is a precedence set and decisions are based on the precedences set in a previous case. That is common law. Code law is from the French, and your book refers to it as civil law. I learned it as code law because I actually studied and got my MBA in Louisiana. And as I mentioned, that is a code law system. That means each judge is interpreting the rules as is written and not as the precedents of the cases that was decided before it. Like I said, this is from the French. They practice it in Central Europe, including Germany. A good friend of mine is a judge. He said, I would rather have your American system because it's just so much work. We have to write an interpretation every time as to how we are interpreting the code, and that goes into the system here. He said, the American judges, they can just decide what they want to decide. The minutes are documented, and that's it here. It becomes a question of precedence. The case is over, the case is closed. These judges have to reinterpret the code each time. In other words, reinterpret was the wrong word. They have to write their evaluation of the code. Anyway, in Louisiana, we learned that this was a good system. As we said, my business law instructor said in the University of Louisiana, we have the best judges money can buy. Hopefully not. There's another system, the theocratic legal system, which is based on religious precepts. I studied in a religious school, like many of you are doing and have done. And one day a friend of mine said, democracy is not in the Bible. And I said, well, no, they didn't have democracy when they wrote the Bible. And he said, well, communism's not in the Bible. And I said, well, they didn't have that either. He said, well, what's in the Bible is theocracy. And if you take a strict Old Testament view of the legal system, a theocracy is what was there. Is that what we would recommend today? I don't think so. I think the mixed legal systems that we have, which are, going according to the rules and expectations of the society, are better here. But, there is an argument to say that God said this is the way you should do it. However, the interpretation of that becomes, a much different thing. Let's just put it in simple terms. My view is democracies have never attacked each other. Very seldom is there a political battle in the sense of a war between democracies. It's usually a theocracy or a collectivistic society that is fighting against another one in terms of actual wars and bullets being fired.